Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Celtic Way. I am your host, John McGinley. I'm joined by Josh McCafferty this morning. We're here to chat through all the latest Celtic news and events and what has been a pretty dramatic few days for Celtic. Josh, that's fair to say. Now, neither myself or you have been on since Celtic beat Rangers at Hampden in the Scottish League Cup semi-final. How are you feeling at the start of this week? It's another big week for Celtic. We've got Midtjylland on Thursday as well, but it's been a fair turnaround in the feeling around Celtic over the last 7 days or so, Josh.
Yeah, 100%. Good morning, everyone. I think this is the most positive I've felt about Celtic all season, from being honest. And it's a nice feeling to have. I thought Celtic were very good in the game at the weekend, barring a wee spell where Rangers looked better with 10 men. But on the whole, I think regardless of any refereeing decisions and controversy, I think on the day the better team won. That's not controversial to say, and as much as there's talk of controversial decisions that went against Rangers, there were a number that went against Celtic too. So I think they balance out at the end of the day, and Celtic did well to win the game. And like you say, you've not been on as well since the game, John. So what did you make of it?
Yeah, I've got a few thoughts. I've got a few thoughts, Josh. Before we get into all, a word from our sponsors at Simply Furniture. Located in Hillington, Glasgow, they're an independent brand dedicated to bringing luxury and contemporary style into homes across the UK. They have a dedicated team to ensure your furniture is delivered with care right to your doorstep. From sofas to dining sets, their handpicked collections offer exceptional value without compromising on style. And if you want to see their range up close, if you visit their showroom in Hillington, Glasgow, and you mention the Celtic Way, you will get a special discount. My thoughts on the game, Josh. Well, listen, these derbies, Josh, when they don't go your way, there can be a lot of fallout, and there's a lot of massaging of the narrative coming out of this. And let me just say that I feel like one club is slightly massaging the outcome of all this because I think it suits Rangers. It suits Rangers supporters to talk about all the refereeing decisions and all the drama within the match rather than acknowledge the frank reality that their new manager lost to a manager who's been retired for six years. Is that controversial to say? I'm not sure, but that is the reality of how everything has played out over the last couple of days. I actually think a lot of it's been a bit overblown. As you say, there was a number of incidents in that match. There seems to be a focus on one or two of them. And just on the Austin Trusty thing, look, I understand there are Celtic fans who understand that that was a straight red card. I think for me, I think a yellow card is a fairly justified position. I have to be honest. I'm being honest. People might say I've got my green tinted specs on, but from looking at the incident and looking at the fact that he was never endangering his opponent, there was not enough force in that to endanger his opponent. I think the referee Nick Walsh has seen the full incident on the pitch. Obviously, he's given the yellow card. He's seen the incident play out in full. He's seen it in real time. He's seen the force or lack of force that has gone into a challenge like that. And then at that point, given he's seen it, it's very hard for VAR to overturn that as a clear and obvious error when Nick Walsh has seen it all unfold on the pitch. So I just think there's been far too much made of that incident in isolation. There was other incidents in the match, as you said, and look, it's not a surprise. I'm not surprised with the way it's been handled in the aftermath. This is how these derbies go sometimes. And as I say, it suits the perception of the game that they've been wronged rather than deal with the reality of Martin O'Neill's done a job in them.
Yeah, I would certainly agree there. And I think even if Rangers didn't go down to 10 men, I think Celtic would have won the game more comfortably than what they did. Because with 11v11, Celtic were the dominant force in the match, particularly in the first half. They were creating chances, doing really well. So, yeah, the narrative is one that it's given Rangers a bit of comfort because they've lost another derby, but everything at Celtic just seems to be rosy at the minute. You've not heard anything from Celtic regarding decisions because they've won the game. The Derek Cornelius one for me is not getting talked about enough. Even if people will be split in opinion over whether it's a red card or yellow card, but if it's a yellow card, he was already booked, so it's at least a yellow card, and he should have been sent off too. But that's not obviously getting spoken about a lot. And even if Celtic lost the game, I don't think you would be getting this amount of furor over refereeing decisions.
I think there would be some issue around the placement of the offside lines of that Celtic goal that was disallowed, because there's certainly contention there about did they use the right lines in the right place at the right time. The public screenshot that was put out by the VAR officials on the broadcast, seemed to indicate that it didn't seem quite right in that extent. He was offside by those lines, but did they use those lines in the right position? So I understand that. I think that would have been a talking point if Celtic had lost the fixture. I agree on the Cornelius thing. I think Cornelius was more at risk of endangering his opponent than Austin Trusty was of Butland. So
I mean, it's a question. What tackle would you rather be on the end of, the Cornelius one or the Austin Trusty light kick in Jack Butland's head? I think I'd rather be Jack Butland out of those two, to be honest. So that probably tells you which one should have been a red card.
I have to say as well is that my point around all of this and why we're discussing this is really, I think the furore and the noise around it suits Celtic to a degree as well. After a confidence building week, now they just want to focus in on themselves as well a bit, be out of the spotlight. Celtic's been in the spotlight all week, obviously with the departure of Brendan Rodgers, Martin O'Neill coming back, all like drama, good and bad. I think it suits Celtic this week to just be so laser focused on Midtjylland. They'll be blocking all of this nonsense out, Josh. We know that about Celtic. It just allows them to focus in on the training pitch again, get over to Denmark, play Midtjylland and see what comes, because I think it's a really difficult game this week. I mean, Martin O'Neill made that point clear. Martin O'Neill was saying, he was at the City Ground earlier in the year when Midtjylland beat Nottingham Forest, and I think he was impressed by them. Midtjylland have been impressive in the Europa League this year. They've got some impressive attacking form of late as well. They're scoring a barrel load of goals. They're not conceding many. And actually, I think the Midtjylland game is probably, if Martin O'Neill is only here for a few games, it'll probably be the most difficult game of his tenure as interim Celtic manager.
Yeah, they're the only team, or one of three teams, in the Europa League that have won 3 from 3 so far. So you're going to be going over there and getting a test. I've seen it over the years. Well, I personally haven't seen it with my own eyes over the years, but going by the record books over the years, Martin O'Neill has led Celtic to some very good and impressive results away from home in Europe. So you wouldn't put it past Celtic to go and get a result on Thursday night. And I think the feeling surrounding this game is one of great optimism after Sunday. And that was the case when, after the win on Wednesday night against Falkirk, the mood surrounding the Rangers game was a bit more positive. And that's certainly the case now going into this Midtjylland game, which, they drew at the weekend, I think 1 each. But barring that, they've been really good of late, scoring goals, getting results, doing well in their domestic league and the Europa League. So I think it's definitely on paper, it's the toughest test Celtic could have in this Europa League this week.
Yeah, and not to make anyone feel too old or to make Josh feel too young, but you raised it there, Josh, so I'm going to dig into it a wee bit. You're not old enough to remember the first Martin O'Neill spell at all, are you? And that's, I think that's an interesting point of view of how you feel about how everything's going since he's returned to the club this week, because you've never experienced Martin O'Neill as a manager in place in a Celtic dugout. You'll probably have obviously known him from spells in management down in England, but mostly as a pundit, perhaps, Josh. What's your perception of Martin O'Neill being in that context, having not experienced him before? Because I fully admit that I've obviously been a little bit swept up in the Martin O'Neill stuff over the last week, because I on the record he's such an iconic manager for myself and such a formative manager in my supporting of Celtic. And so it would be akin for you, I think, if Ange came back and was suddenly a monster again in terms of getting Celtic back to a winning machine. So I'm biased. So I'm interested in the perspective of Martin O'Neill over this time from someone who doesn't remember that first spell.
Yeah, I was born in April 2005 and Martin O'Neill left a month later. So, I have absolutely no recollections of him in a Celtic dugout, barring some charity matches over the years. And like you say, my only real knowledge of him is as a pundit. Bit of knowledge from him managing Ireland a couple of years ago, or just over under a decade ago. But I've really enjoyed it. I feel like it's myself as a supporter and covering it in the media and such, stepping back in a time warp to the days of the likes of yourself, John, no offence, like the likes of my dad, because my dad talks so much about Martin O'Neill and how much of a legendary figure he is. So it's been really nice in that regard, and it's also been really nice to see that he can still do it. He can still get results. And for the likes of me, I can't speak for everyone that's my age and my generation, and people who are a wee bit younger than me, but it's only really furthered Martin O'Neill's status within the Celtic supporting people like myself, because everyone knows he's a great figure, led Celtic to the UEFA Cup, won numerous titles, won a treble, but don't get to see it with your own eyes. But now you're getting to see, albeit in a short space of time, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, just how great a figure he is and how good a manager he still is. You know, and it's not as if it's just been a game against Falkirk and then maybe a game against Kilmarnock or Aberdeen. He's come in and he's managed to beat Rangers in a League Cup semi-final. And it's a fixture that Celtic hadn't won in just under a year. So he's come in and managed to get a big result there. And who knows what's going to happen on Thursday night. But if he gets something there, then wow. But yeah, it's just, for me, on the whole, with the Martin O'Neill coming back, it's just furthered his legendary status. And it's been really nice to actually see it in the flesh rather than just watching old DVD clips.
Yeah, and to understand a bit about what everyone's talking about, because even I just think he's just been a breath of fresh air in the way he's handled the media and the way he's handled everything. Just nothing seems to faze him at all. It's water off a duck's back. Everything that's thrown his way just seems to, yeah.
Even his approach to management is something totally different to what I've experienced with Celtic managers over the years. You know, Brendan Rodgers, Ange Postecoglou had his own kind of way of dealing with all things media, and you had Neil Lennon, Ronnie Dyla, and that's the kind of Celtic managers I remember. There's only really 4. So Martin O'Neill's been so refreshing. It's been a bit strange because I remember I watched his first press conference when I was covering it for the site, and I was sitting watching it and I was thinking, this is one of the strangest press conferences I think I've ever watched. But then I was speaking to my dad about it when he came in from work later that evening, and he was saying that, yeah, that's just the way Martin O'Neill is. That's what he's like. And I began to realise that over the press conferences that I've watched and the interviews that I've watched since. But yeah, it's been so, actually, like you say, refreshing. He's so honest. He doesn't mind a joke here and there, and he can clearly back it up by being serious behind the scenes and making the players feel 10 feet tall and playing a different way, implementing a new way that Celtic have been playing in these past couple of games, and it's been effective and it's getting them results. And I think everyone would probably agree with me that this is the most they've enjoyed watching Celtic this season. You know, 7 goals in the last 2 games, playing great attacking football, 10 shots on target in the game against Rangers at the weekend, 20 shots in total with just over 50% of the ball. So it shows that you don't need possession for possession's sake to make things happen and get you off your seat while you're playing football. So his style is still very much effective in the modern game. And yeah, I'm just loving this whole situation at the minute.
Yeah, he can be very honest with the media, but he's also very good at deflecting questions he doesn't want to answer. And he does it skillfully in a way that doesn't seem guarded. It just seems natural. Now, I remember the way he handled the media before, and even I thought last week's press conference there was a strangeness about it. And I think as I said last week, it was just a jarring nature, the jarring nature of feeling like Celtic were in such a serious moment of drama and intrigue behind the scenes with the Dermot Desmond statement and Brendan Rodgers leaving, and then Martin O'Neill just coming in and being jovial. Really, that he was jovial in that press conference. It did seem strange at the time, but I think as the weeks panned out, we've seen first of all why he's had that manner, and because I think it has diffused and lifted everyone at the club, not just supporters but the players too. But also that's how he deals with difficult questions. Sometimes he's a master at it. Just a word on Shawn Maloney, Josh, because obviously he was installed as the player pathway manager. He was within the club. I think you'd noted on a couple of occasions that he has been he's not been absent from Lennox Town. He's not, he's not burrowed away in an office somewhere. He has been observing training a lot, observing the players a lot throughout the start of this season. I think he has to take a lot of credit for the way the last week's gone as well, undoubtedly. And I think you saw moments of that even on Sunday where the halftime team talk on the pitch in extra time seemed to be very much directed by Shawn Maloney in terms of instructions and tactical instructions. Martin O'Neill happy to let him do that. It didn't at that moment. They really needed to be organised and just see that match out at that point. And Shawn Maloney seemed to be directing those discussions, and he'll have had a massive part to play over the last week in getting Celtic playing like they have been.
Yeah, I put a tweet out last night just basically saying what you're saying there. That definitely he's been an underappreciated figure in this mini Celtic resurgence. He clearly has the trust and the backing of both Martin O'Neill and the players. Even aside from him taking the wee halftime team talk in extra time, if you heard at certain junctures, he was clearly barking out instructions to the players, very lively on the touchline. There is unconfirmed reports, rumours that he went over to the Rangers dugout after JD Gassama tried to play on when Celtic put the ball out for an injury, and supposedly Shawn Maloney was raging and over at the Rangers dugout. But since he came back to the club as player pathway manager on a more serious note, he's made a good impact. He's been good in his role. He's been in and around Lennoxtown. I believe he has lunch at Lennoxtown, breakfast at Lennoxtown. He's in and around the environment there. So the players know who he is, and that's good. And in terms of sorting loans for players, he's been very active in that department. Although Celtic only have one cooperation agreement, he was behind that a lot. He wanted another, and still another berth open there at Ayr. In terms of Callum Osmond, I think him coming into the team has Shawn Maloney written all over it. Yeah. He obviously was looking to sort Callum Osmond a loan to a Scottish Championship club. Callum Osmond didn't want to go, and he stayed at Celtic, and well, thankfully he has, because he's done really well in the past couple of games. So yeah, that definitely has Maloney written all over it, which is good, because it shows that he can make the correct decisions, because we've seen how good Osmond has been. In terms of his future, I really wonder what's going to happen with Shawn Maloney if obviously Martin O'Neill doesn't stay as the permanent manager, because I think he's certainly done enough to be part of the new regime if the new manager, whoever it is, wants him to be there. Because he's certainly tactically switched on, and I don't really remember Shawn Maloney, the player, but I'm led to believe he wasn't that much of a fiery character. He was quite a quiet guy, yeah, but that seems to be the opposite.
Yeah, he was a fantastic player. Like, first and foremost, he was a fantastic player for Celtic, and as I say, he emerged through at the Martin O'Neill time, but he really came into his own after Martin O'Neill left. But Martin O'Neill knew what he had, because he signed him for Aston Villa as well, and he's even joking last week that the fact that he went back to Celtic homesick, he's still not forgiven Shawn Maloney for that. Martin O'Neill really enjoyed him as a player. The thing about Shawn Maloney as well over the years is he's very much, I believe John Clark was a massive figure for Shawn Maloney. Shawn Maloney is steeped in the history of football, steeped in things that have gone by both at Celtic and in the wider football sphere. He's very much what someone would describe as a student of the game almost, and not just tactically but also in the feeling and the aura around football as well. Shawn Maloney's steeped in that, even if he didn't manage to harness that at all in his own right as a manager at Hibs, and I would have my doubts about him being the outright manager at Celtic, but in a coaching capacity, will he be the new John Kennedy, for example? Now, John Kennedy over the years has had a lot of criticism from Celtic fans. He's had a lot of praise from Celtic fans at times. He's had an up and down Celtic career behind the scenes. But what is not in doubt is that he was beloved behind the scenes. He was beloved by the players. He was beloved by many players who have come through Celtic, both homegrown, but players that have signed and then moved on. John Kennedy was a main man for these guys, and I think Celtic will need that continuity, I think, over the course of the next few years as well. I'm not saying Shawn Maloney is automatically that, but what I'm saying is Celtic will need a strong grounding of coaching staff in the club, because I think that's been enormously beneficial to Celtic over the last decade. I'm not saying it was all down to John Kennedy, but I do believe that continuity has been big for the players themselves.
Yeah, you saw Callum McGregor's comments before the game at the weekend in his Friday press conference talking about John Kennedy and how much of a respected figure he was behind the scenes. And I think the club will realise that. You'd like to think that the club will realise that they've lost a guy who's been in and around the environment for over 25 years, a consistent winner who's been a real mark of stability in some tough times. When Brendan Rodgers left first time around, when Ange left during the COVID season, Kennedy was there throughout, taking interim charge of the team. So I think they'll realise that they've lost someone like that, and that kind of needs replaced. And Shawn Maloney is certainly, if you want an addition for a role like that, he's done really well in his auditions so far, and he's had a really good grounding working with Roberto Martinez in the Belgium setup. He's capable of taking and leading training sessions for the likes of Kevin De Bruyne, for the likes of Romelu Lukaku. So I think he has no qualms about taking Celtic training sessions involving players like Johnny Kenny. So yeah, I think he certainly has done enough to stake a claim for being around when the next management team come in.
And as we know, the public chat around everything that's going to happen is that there's an expectation he moves away from his interim role as a coach and moves back into his player pathway role. But I think what's said publicly around this and what actually happens could be changeable, not least because ultimately it's Dermot Desmond who decides a lot of this. specifically with regard to Martin O'Neill. Now, Martin O'Neill admitting that he would love to stay on for a little bit more. Obviously would. I think he's caught the bug again, but he says that he's not expecting to be at Celtic beyond the international break, and there's no indication that he will be at this point either, because that international break is a stopping point that you can't really ignore. That it would be a logical place to change the manager if Celtic have an outstanding candidate lined up. But I think what all of this is underlying for me is that if Celtic don't have an outstanding candidate lined up to come in quickly, then perhaps this O'Neill and Maloney thing could go on for a wee bit longer, at least until the final against St Mirren. I think that final against St Mirren is no gimme by any means. St Mirren are a capable team on their day, undoubtedly, and they'll be just so up for that match, obviously.
Yeah,
So, what's your thoughts on kind of what they're saying publicly about Martin O'Neill being here, and the reality of it? He might be here for a few weeks longer than everyone is admitting at Celtic.
I don't think it's a bad thing if he's here for a couple of weeks longer than what he thinks he's going to be, because obviously we're only 2 games in, but the results have improved, and I think people have no concerns about Martin O'Neill being able to get results consistently on a domestic basis. So Dermot Desmond is probably pretty happy at the way things are going at the minute, because it buys him, it buys the board a bit of time in terms of trying to appoint a manager, and they don't really have to rush into things. If Celtic drop points against Falkirk, if they get beat off Rangers at the weekend, then I think those at the top of the club would be hurrying about trying to appoint a manager. But with Martin O'Neill, he's given them that time, because things are back to being stable on the pitch in terms of results. In terms of Martin O'Neill as a long-term option, I don't know if that's a question that we're prepared to answer at some point, but he's certainly done well, and I think he deserves the cup final. He's, in terms of him as a figure, it would be a great way to mark the end of, well, definitely the end of his managerial career, but he would secretly love it as well, admitted that in his post-match presser. But like you say, St Mirren are a very tough nut to crack. Everyone thought Motherwell, their attractive brand of football, would work well on that Hampden Park pitch on Saturday, but St Mirren were the ones who scored 4 goals in the end and won the game comfortably, and they've got some really good players. Celtic obviously play them the first game back after the international break in Paisley, so they're a good side, a well-drilled side, and I mean, if it is Martin O'Neill, it would be great to see him lift a trophy.
And it's just fairy tale stuff. I mean, that's going to. I mean, this has been a difficult time for Celtic. It's been a difficult time for Celtic fans. There's been just a lot of drama, and I think something of that ilk would be just such a boost to everyone. I mean, you've seen the reaction to even Sunday. Saw the reaction to even the Falkirk game.
Yeah.
I think the upturn in interest in Celtic over the last week has been remarkable, and we can see it because we see numbers and we see all sorts of stuff. We can see how engaged people are in Celtic at any given time. And let me just say, people are very engaged in Celtic right now. And it's a good news story. People were very engaged about Celtic at the end of the transfer window, but that was for negative reasons. The whole last week has just been pure positivity, pure nostalgia. Just nothing really you can say bad about how the last 6 days or so has gone. And granted, I think there are conversations and arguments to be had about what went wrong at Celtic over the summer, and Celtic need to sort that, and I think they need to communicate more effectively than blaming it all on one man about what has happened over the summer and what steps they're taking to address the future of Celtic Football Club, because I'm just not buying, regardless of how the last week's gone, that it was all down to Brendan Rodgers. I'm just not buying that. As I've said, I think it was the right time for Brendan Rodgers to leave, and I think we've seen that play out on the pitch. The players are more energised and look more up for it than ever. But everything that went wrong this summer was not all down to Brendan Rodgers. I think the club need to reckon with that. But it is good to just be feeling good about Celtic. Just on Callum Osmond, you mentioned him there. I think that there is an element in the Shawn Maloney thing and getting him at least involved in the match squad. Martin O'Neill has never been really shy to throw in a youngster or throw in someone that you might not expect and try and get a tune out of them. He, at the moment, doesn't seem like he'll be eligible to play on Thursday. However, there is a new rule in UEFA competition this year where if you have a player that you have to deregister due to a long-term injury, in this instance Cameron Carter-Vickers, you can then replace them with someone on the A-list. Now, we have no confirmation or indication from Celtic on this, but it could be a talking point that Cameron Carter-Vickers might be deregistered for the Europa League squad, and that would free up someone else coming in, whether it's Callum Osmond, whether it's Jemai Simpson-Pusey, someone of that ilk. You would know that Shin Yamada and Hayato Inamura are also not in the Celtic squad. We don't have confirmation yet, but it would make sense, wouldn't it, that you deregister Carter Vickers
Yeah.
because he's out for months. He's just undergone surgery. He's not going to feature in this league phase for Celtic. So it makes sense to deregister and then bring someone else. And at the moment, the foreign player that you would probably look to bring in, just given the dearth of attacking options, is Callum Osmond.
Yeah, and I think if obviously Cameron Carter-Vickers is deregistered, you still have at the back at central defence Liam Scales, Austin Trusty, Dane Murray, even Kieran Tierney can play there as well. So you've got options. It's not as if you're going to have a lack of central defenders in the squad if Vickers drops out. So it would be the logical move if Celtic were to do it. Callum Osmond is in fine form at the minute. He's high on confidence, and if he gets to play on Thursday night, then he'll be relishing that opportunity for his European debut. So yeah, it would be a good move if Celtic are able to do it. They have to do it before match day 6 that we're currently about to go into. Match day 4 we're about to go into. So yeah, they can definitely do it. And I think they probably will. But we were obviously discussing before we came on. We're not sure if if you take out a defender, you need to put a defender in, or if you take out a defender, you cannot put a forward in. So that's all kind of small print stuff. But if it's what we think it is, and you can just take one player out and put one player in, then certainly Celtic should be.
And a Scottish team has already utilised this rule this season. Aberdeen in the Conference League, the rules apply across the UEFA competition. Aberdeen did this in the Conference League when Christopher Tolbers was out with a long-term injury, and then they registered Alfie Dorrington. So it can be done. You can only do it once, and as Josh said, it has to be done before match day 6. So we await that with intrigue over the next couple of days. It would be good to get Callum Osmond in this team, because I don't think there's a Celtic supporter in the world who didn't enjoy the joy on his face, even if Martin O'Neill suggested that he milked it a little bit. It just the absolute joy on his face at making that impact to Celtic. He said it's the happiest he's ever been in his life. You need that good feeling of energy. That's what gets supporters on board with players, and that's what effectively can be the making of a player at the club, to harness that confidence and then go on a bit of a run.
Obviously, they're totally different players, totally different positions, and it's very early days with Callum Osmond. But his emergence reminds me a bit of Jeremy Frimpong. Jeremy Frimpong came into the team, a lot of positivity. Everyone loved him. He was a real fan favourite. In terms of his play style, he was very energetic and quick too. And there are a lot of parallels with Callum Osmond. You know, he's a young kid, a teenager who's come up to Celtic from a club in the English Premier League without really making a senior appearance, and he's come into the team. No one's really expected him to make a mark, and come in, scores against Rangers, and he has a lot of involvement with the fans. Absolutely loving it. A really happy kid, and it's a bit like Jeremy Frimpong when he won the League Cup with Celtic after getting sent off against Rangers. His interview was quite something after that day, and it's somewhat similar to what we've seen from Callum Osmond at the weekend. So he has a lot of attributes as a young player that I just don't understand why he wasn't getting a chance under Brendan Rodgers. It's absolutely puzzling. He's very quick, direct. He's razor sharp in and around the box, and some of his hold-up play at the weekend was actually really good. So I hope he gets the chance on Thursday night to come into the team, because he deserves it.
We'll do 10 minutes of questions or so. If anyone's got a burning question about Celtic or the Celtic way, or anything regarding the future of Celtic, or anything that you feel like we can offer some chat or insight on, feel free to ask the question. Danny Boy asking any update on Jota. Now, I mean, the timeline on Jota has always been the new year. He was not expected back until 2026 effectively, and then it'll take time for him to build up his match fitness. Celtic won't be taking any chances or risks with Jota at all with an injury of that type, which can be career altering to an extent when you're out for that length of time. So we hope that his rehabilitation's gone well and that he's back involved in early 2026. We know that he's in Glasgow at the moment, of course. I know he had some rehabilitation time in Portugal when it first happened, especially after he'd just undergone a surgery. But he is back in Scotland. He's involved with the squad. He is in and around the squad. Martin O'Neill speaking very funnily and candidly about Jota's being the translator for him in a more multilingual Celtic dressing room. Now, obviously, Martin O'Neill dealt with foreign players in his first spell at Celtic, but he said that a lot of the foreign players back then spoke really fluent English, and that it's not the case in the Celtic dressing room like now, where some people don't have as good English. I think he highlighted Marcello Sarachi as someone who doesn't have the best English, and that Jota has been translating for him. So Jota's definitely in and amongst the group working with Martin O'Neill, helping him get his message across to some of these players. And listen, whether he speaks English or not, I don't think anyone's reacted better to Martin O'Neill coming in than Marcelo Sarace, Josh.
Yeah, he's been absolutely brilliant the past couple of games. He was so good. The weekend at left back, marauding up and down that left hand side, linking up well with Sebastian Tinekti. And obviously, we don't know who the next Celtic manager, the permanent Celtic manager, is going to be. But I'd be very surprised if they didn't ask the question to Boca Juniors about a permanent deal, because if you're looking for, obviously, Kieran Tierney, we know what he brings, but you always need a consistent, reliable other option, a left back, when you have Tierney in your squad, and Marcelo Sarace has proved to be just that, dependable in big games, experienced pro, and he's a real Celtic player, isn't he? And I think I would like to see him sign permanently next summer if it is possible.
I think he's got a fighting spirit as well, saying. I think you need that, especially in a derby game. And listen, he's played big derbies in South America before as well. But it's one of those ones where, you know, I'm trying to temper all my feelings over the last week, Josh, because I was very negative about Celtic even on Tuesday last week. Suddenly feeling very positive about Celtic. I'm trying not to let myself get too carried away. I'm obviously enjoying the moment, but there's an element of let's just wait and see how things play out. Listen, if Celtic go and do a job on Midtjylland and hammer them on Thursday night, I think I'll be fully on board with the Martin O'Neill train and extending for as long as he wants it, to be quite honest with you. But that's yet to be played out. And listen, Martin O'Neill, as we say, ever the kind of wise man in the media, very much making the point as soon as he could make it, basically, in his post-match press conference on Sunday, that Midtjylland are going to be so tough. So we'll see. Hazelfin asking any update on Iheanacho. I mean, listen, a lot of rumours about Iheanacho over the weekend, a lot of them nonsense. He wasn't part of the match squad at Celtic in terms of being available for selection, but he was part of the wider Celtic group at the weekend. He was on the team bus, he went to Hampden, he was still involved in that sense. So we'll wait and see the latest on Iheanacho when Martin O'Neill speaks later this week. He had an injury, obviously. He went down in that Europa League game. Then there was chat it wasn't as bad as they'd first feared. And then Martin O'Neill kind of saying towards the end of last week that a late call would be made on his fitness. So I'm expecting him to be available for selection this week, Josh. As I say, he's very much still in and around the Celtic squad at Hampden with the squad, albeit not part of the match selection.
Yeah, some absolute nonsense rumours on Saturday. Typical pre-derby rumours. However, coming back into the Celtic side, he's got a tough job. You know, Johnny Kenny scoring at the weekend, Callum Osmond scoring at the weekend. So he'll have a difficult time trying to get some minutes. But we all know he's got that bit of quality about him, and he's had a decent start to life at Celtic. Couple of crucial goals. I'm intrigued to see how Martin O'Neill utilises him if he does.
Yeah, someone digging me up about my Jota comment saying that he was told he'd be back in November. Listen, Brendan Rodgers said he'd be back in the new year, so I'm not responding to unconfirmed rumours. That is what Brendan Rodgers said about Jota. So listen, if he's back before that, that would be great. But I wouldn't expect him to see in a Celtic shirt before the end of 2025. Is what I would say. Unless Brendan Rodgers is mistaken and he's made a swifter recovery, but he's not had a setback or anything like that. This is just a natural reaction to what the injury was in the first place, which was a very serious injury. How are you feeling then about the rest of the week, Josh? I mean, are you getting swept away in all this optimism, or are you still waiting for Celtic to come back down to earth on Thursday night in Denmark?
I think I'm getting a wee bit swept away, if I'm being honest, John. I think that's only natural when Celtic have had such a difficult season so far. Any grain of positivity, you will cling to it. And it's quite a big grain of positivity that I've had over the past week. So I think it's only natural that people are getting swept up by the whole Martin O'Neill nostalgia. Thursday night's going to be a totally different game to what Celtic experienced on Sunday and what they experienced last Wednesday against Falkirk. A really tough test, arguably the toughest test this group of players could have all season to date. So tough game. If Celtic managed to get a result in Denmark, it would be quite something. And then I think that the Martin O'Neill calls are only going to get louder. I'm looking forward to the game, though. I think I'm intrigued to see how this team does up against a side like that who are flying, and what Martin O'Neill's approach to the game is going to be. We've seen, obviously, in years gone by when he went away from home in Europe, been more solid defensively, implemented a back three or a back five. I don't know if you'd see as drastic a switching system on Thursday night, remains to be seen. But don't forget, Celtic have a crucial game on Sunday too. Kilmarnock's a massive game given the way things are at the top of the table. Hearts kick off at 3 o'clock, Celtic kick off at 4 o'clock. Hearts are 9 points clear. They will be 9 points clear going into Sunday. And if they're winning at half time when Celtic kick off, the gap could be 12 points. So Celtic need to make sure, out of the 2 games this week, they must win Kilmarnock if you're picking one.
Yeah, just to round off, someone asking, has Osman been added to the Europa squad? We don't actually know. We just know that it's possible if Celtic want to do it. I'm not sure when we'd find that out, Josh. Probably when Martin O'Neill speaks to the media.
Yeah.
But these lists sometimes pop up on the UEFA site. I wonder if that can really happen at any time. I know that the B list gets submitted 24 hours before. Listen, what I'm saying is we'll be making sure we'll be right across the latest on this and checking the UEFA squad list and all of that. There's lots to come on Celtic's trip to Midtjylland tomorrow, of course, where there'll be press conferences and training footage and the like, and we'll have as much coverage as we can allow, both on the YouTube channel and on the website. Josh, thanks for joining us. Everyone in the live chat, thanks for joining us. Leave your thoughts below on how you feel Celtic will get on against Midtjylland later in the week and what team selection you'd like to see it ultimately. I think we'll be getting on to that tomorrow as well. We thank everyone for their support over the last few days and watching the channel and watching the video. If you like what we do, feel free to consider subscribing to the YouTube channel, which is free. You just need to press the button below, the subscribe button below, and you'll be subscribed to all our latest videos when they come out. And if you click the bell, I think you get notifications as well about when our latest videos are out too. So we would very much appreciate that. And if you would consider subscribing to celticway.co.uk, which is only £1 for 6 months of access to our premium articles and interviews and analysis and tactics and deep dives into various aspects of Celtic, which this week will include finances and the fan survey and all sorts of stuff. So we've got lots of stuff coming up on Celtic, fully covered across the board, whether it's positive around Martin O'Neill's return or whether it needs to be a closer look at the direction Celtic are taking under the current board and Dermot Desmond. So we appreciate you as always, and we'll see you again next time. Josh, again, thanks for joining me this morning, and thanks everyone in the live chat for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow morning with lots more on Celtic. Goodbye.